Every week I talk to families who are moving to Miami that have already made up their mind. They know they want to live in Coral Gables, or they know they want to live in Coconut Grove, and they want me to tell them that they're making the right choice. But here's the thing, I can't do that. While Coral Gables and Coconut Grove are very similar, they do have some big differences, and you could be making the wrong choice. My name is Lynley Ciorobea. I'm a realtor here in Miami. I've sold over $300 million worth of homes over the 17 years that I've been in the business. I love what I do, and I'd love to help you figure out which one is right for your family, Coconut Grove or Coral Gables. So let's dive in. Coral Gables and Coconut Grove are two of the most popular places for people when they're choosing to live in Miami in the areas south of downtown. And the truth is, they're only divided by one street. So on this side of Lejeune Road, you're in Coconut Grove, and on the other side of Lejeune Road, you're in Coral Gables. How do you know the difference? Well, there are some very distinct differences between them, but you wouldn't know it if you were standing on Lejeune, which was which if you didn't know. And they're both completely different than the Miami you picture in your mind when you hear, I'm from Miami. You're picturing me on South Beach clubbing, lying on the sand, and the truth is, I never do that. And the world that I live in is so completely different than that. Which is why I think people, when they're moving here from New York and Chicago and California, land on Coconut Grove or Coral Gables because they're very similar to the life that they're used to, and it feels a lot more like home than being next door to the people that are going clubbing on South Beach on Saturday night, because nobody in these parts are doing that. So in this video, I'm going to try to break down 4 things. Number 1, walkability and lifestyle between the two. Number 2, the commute and the location between the two and how it differs. Number 3, the schools and the family infrastructure, depending on which one you pick. And number 4, prices. How does it differ if you're buying in one or the other? So let's dive in. Okay, walkability and lifestyle. So here's the thing. Coral Gables was literally a planned city. Planned in the 1920s with sidewalks on almost every street and very tree covered, very lush, very neighborhoody. So unless you live close to the downtown Coral Gables business district or close to the South Miami business district, there's really not a lot of walking to a cafe or to a shop, but there's a lot of walkable options in Coral Gables because everywhere you go, they have sidewalks. Homes are set back from the street. Homes are built so that families can get around, and there is a lot of walking going on in Coral Gables. It's made for that. So it is very oriented for walking in that way. It's just if you're not near one of those main hubs of business, you're probably not going to be walking anywhere. Okay. In Coconut Grove, that was not a planned city. Coconut Grove feels a little bit more bohemian. The setbacks are different. You're much closer to your neighbors. The houses are built closer to the street. In fact, something that people complain about when they're buying a house in Coconut Grove is that their house doesn't have enough parking. That's very normal because it just wasn't planned in such a way that homes were built with ample parking for lots of cars. There are almost no sidewalks in the south and north areas of Coconut Grove where a lot of the homes are, but in most cases in Coconut Grove, especially if you're in the Center Grove, you can walk to town. So you could walk to Coco Walk, you can walk to the movies, you can walk to coffee. It's a little bit more accessible to get to than if you were living in Coral Gables. Part of that is simply because Coconut Grove is not quite as big as Coral Gables in terms of, miles that it covers. But I would say, despite the fact that it's not built for a lot of walking because there's no sidewalks, you could get on the Commodore Trail, which runs up and down Main Highway, very safe, lots of bikers, lots of walkers, and make your way to the center of Coconut Grove for a coffee or for dinner. That's very normal. The truth of the matter is, when it comes to walkability, both of these areas have their pros and cons. Coral Gables has lots of things happening, farmers markets and outdoor events. So if you live close to the hubs, you do have options for walkability. Coconut Grove also has all kinds of festivals and there's always something to do. So depending on where you live, you're going to enjoy being able to walk if you can. Please know, Miami is not a walking city. Everybody in Miami has a car. You're gonna need a car for everybody in your house that drives. So plan on being in your car a lot, but if you're close to one of these centers of business, then maybe you're gonna walk and enjoy that when you're here. Okay, so let's talk about commuting. Here's the thing, Coconut Grove and Coral Gables are really close to each other. So The commute is pretty much the same. We'd be having a different conversation if you were thinking about buying in Pinecrest or if you're thinking about buying in Palmetto Bay and you work downtown. I think one of the reasons why property values are so high in Coconut Grove is because of its proximity to downtown. So people that need to go downtown for business like to live in the Grove because it gets them closer to work. If you're living in Pinecrest, you're adding at least another 20 minutes to your commute, maybe as many as 40 minutes to your commute. Now, Coral Gables has a downtown district with a lot of businesses. So you're probably not going to find a whole lot of law firms in Coconut Grove, but you definitely find a lot of law firms centered in Coral Gables. So depending on where your office is, if you work downtown or you work on Brickell, your commute's going to be roughly the same from most parts of Coconut Grove or Coral Gables. If you work in Coral Gables, then shoot, your commute just got cut way down if you live in the Gables, especially if you're on the north side of US 1. But even if you live in Coconut Grove, the commute's not going to be that long because you're not that far away. If you're working south, let's say you're working in Pinecrest in the Daytran building or somewhere south of Coral Gables, you're going to have a reverse commute. So you're going to be going against traffic in the morning and against traffic in the afternoon, which makes your commute really easy. It's the going north in the morning and coming south in the afternoon where we really do have a heck of a lot of traffic, and you're going to feel it if you live on the south side of downtown. Next, let's talk about schools. Here's the truth. Miami has a plethora of schools, whether it's preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, or high schools. Coconut Grove and Coral Gables have tons of options. I have friends who have sent their kids to elementary school in the Grove and middle school in the Gables and high school in either one of them. Coconut Grove has great private high schools like Carrollton and Ransom Everglades. Coral Gables has excellent private schools too. I'm trying to think of some. Well, St. Thomas Episcopal is elementary school, and St. Philip's. St. Stephen's is located in Coconut Grove. So there's a whole host of private and public school options in these two towns. There's definitely a ton of crossover. So it really matters what your child needs, which school is the best fit. When it comes to public schools, if you live in Coconut Grove, you have a few options for elementary school, one option for middle school at Carver, and then in high school, if you live in Coconut Grove, you're going to Coral Gables High. So all of the families that live in Coral Gables and Coconut Grove, their high school is Coral Gables. Elementary schools that are public, if you live in Coral Gables, consist of Coral Gables Elementary, Sunset Elementary, and David Fairchild Elementary. I don't think anybody is zoned for Carver Elementary in Coral Gables. So great school options. But here's the thing. In the past few years, there's been a host of new charter schools that have come on the scene. So whether you live in the Grove or the Gables, we have all these new charter schools that are great options. They feel like a public school. They're free to the families that go there, but they're just a little bit different than the typical public school options. You can't go wrong in either one of these areas with all the variety of schools that they offer you. Every school is different. Every school has its own personality, set of values, things that they do well. So you kind of need to get to know the schools, but I think your first decision needs to be public or private or charter, and then from there you kind of zoom in on it. Truth of the matter is, private school tuitions are very high, and they're no different between the Grove and the Gables. So if you're thinking you want to go the private school route, it doesn't matter which area you live in. They cost the same. They're about the same distance away, and you have really excellent options to choose from. Let's talk about the numbers. How much does it cost to buy a home in Coconut Grove? How much does it cost to buy a home in Coral Gables? You know, we can get really nuanced here because it depends on what kind of home you're buying and where. How big is the lot? How big is the house? How new is the house? But I'm going to give you a very general rule of thumb. The farther south you go away from downtown Miami, the more bang you get for your buck. So Coconut Grove tends to be the most valuable homes in Miami, south of downtown and Brickell. Coral Gables is ever so slightly more affordable. You get a little bit more bang for your buck in Coral Gables. So the median sale price of a home in Coral Gables right now is $2 million. The average price per square foot in Coral Gables is $1,000 a square foot. When we go into Coconut Grove, that just bumps up a little bit. Right now, a 10,000 square foot piece of land in Coconut Grove with a house that needs to be torn down will go for more than $2 million. There's a lot more new construction homes happening happening in Coconut Grove. That's driving values up. The price per square foot of a home in Coconut Grove, I would argue, is more than $1,000 on average right now. So it's close, but it's just a little bit more expensive in the Grove. Remember, the Grove isn't quite as big. We're working with a smaller sample size. It depends on what part of the Grove we're talking about, what part of Coral Gables we're talking about. I really think at the end of the day, it comes down to what is the land worth. We've run out of land in Miami. There's no more land for people to build on. So land is very valuable. The size of your lot will help determine the price of your house. If your house is on a big lot, it's going to be more expensive than the same house you can find on a smaller lot. So when you think about it, just think the farther I get from downtown, the more affordable the houses get. Most expensive is Coconut Grove. Next is Coral Gables. Then how do you know which one to pick? It's almost like not a fair question. They're both awesome in their own right, but they both are very different. It just depends on what you like. You need to come to Miami. You need to drive the streets. I will tell you, my husband says he wouldn't pick either one, and here's why. Coconut Grove tends to be tight streets. It's hard to have two cars passing each other on some of the streets sometimes because the streets are very narrow and the homes are built close to the street. So it's not a neighborhood where your kids are going to be riding around on their bikes all the time unless they get to the Commodore Trail where they finally feel safer to be doing that. Coconut Grove is very jungly, it's very bohemian, it's very lush, it's gorgeous, but it's not for everyone. Coral Gables, on the other hand, is like your polished big brother. You're required to keep your lawn trimmed. You're required to make sure your roof isn't dirty. You're not allowed to have a shingle roof in Coral Gables. It's just more polished. So almost every street has a sidewalk. All the homes are set back from the street. It feels a little bit more elbow room. You just feel a little bit more comfortable, I would say. It also can be jungly. It's just not quite as green and lush as Coconut Grove. You also don't have the proximity to the Coconut Grove Village if you're living in Coral Gables. They're both amazing. I love them both. I would be perfectly happy to live in either one, but they do have a different feeling. So if you're thinking about which one do I pick, my best advice would be come down and see them. Drive the streets, take it in, see what you like. Because some people say, I will only live in Coconut Grove and I will never live anywhere else. And some people say, I'm a diehard Coral Gables person, Coral Gables until I die. Which one are you? We'll just have to have you take a look around and see what you think. If you're thinking about making a move down here and you're just not quite sure, you still have questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me. Lynley Ciorobea, residential real estate agent with Real Broker. I'm happy to answer your questions. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, and keep watching for more where I break down all the things you need to know if you're thinking about moving to Miami, specifically Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, South Miami, Pinecrest, or Palmetto Bay. That's what I know best. See you later.